Senator Martín Quezada. So welcome, Senator. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. We appreciate it very much. You may be the final candidate, statewide candidate that's coming to speak before our group. And in your honor, we decided to make the subject area of this the state budget, because I think we hear a lot about it, but we don't necessarily understand much about it. So I'm going to make a few quick announcements and then we will turn the program over to you, Senator. I wanted to mention that if you're supposed to get your ballots in the mail and you haven't received them, then something's wrong, because the ballots have been out for about 2 weeks. Have most of you sent your ballots in?
No.
Yes. Yes.
Ellen, I
Yes.
know several people who have not received them, so who do they contact?
Say that again, Scott.
I have several people contacting me that they did not receive their ballots and they normally do. Who would they contact? The Yavapai
County recorder, either Yavapai or Coconino County recorders, and make sure that, first of all, that they're on the early voting list.
Right.
And if they're not, then they'll have to go to the polls. But yeah, they should have received them by now.
Good. Thank you.
Also, Ellen, sometimes if they're not Democrats or Republicans, they will not receive their ballot.
No, these are definitely Democrats.
Yay.
If they were Republicans, Scott, well, never mind.
Well, thank you, Ellen. You know me well.
Okay. Home rule. There's a lot of misinformation flying around about home rule. We definitely do want home rule. We want to persuade our neighbors that home rule is in the best interest of this town, and it would be disastrous if it does not pass. Every group that I know, every progressive group I know, has sent out emails urging people to tell their neighbors, vote yes on home rule. So if there's any doubt, yes, yes, yes. Also, there are a ton of signs up, political signs, and a lot of them in my neighborhood in particular, near the medical center, are for Samara Armstrong. People don't realize she is a Trumper. She is very, very conservative. And if people want to learn more about her, they can go onto YouTube and type in her name, and you will see how many appearances she's made on Steve Bannon's show. This is not the kind of person we want as mayor of this town. We do not want to bring that kind of radical force into our city. So if you're brave enough to talk to people that have their lawn signs out, just make sure they know who it is they're voting for and how little experience she has in running any kind of a government, let alone any kind of an organization. There will be an election night watch party at the DORR offices at 7 o'clock on August the 2nd. This is the primary election, and we will be trying to get as many results as possible. And we will be partying and patting ourselves on the back for a job well done, because most of the people on this screen right now have worked pretty hard for these primary elections. And hopefully things will go in our favor and we'll be pleased and have a festive night. I just wanted to also mention we are having our Congressman Tom O'Halloran to the library on August the 12th at 3:30 to 5:30 for a meet and greet. This is not necessarily open your wallet, although certainly it would be welcome. Two prominent national journals, both the National Journal and Roll Call, have listed Tom O'Halloran's seat as one of the most vulnerable Democratic seats in the entire House of Representatives across the entire nation. So Tom has a tough battle on his hands. We need to support him. We need to help him in any way possible. So it'll be great to meet him and see him and spend time with him and hear what he needs on August the 12th.
Ellen, can I say something?
Yeah, sure.
I got a very large postcard in the mail, which was attacking Walt Blackman, who's running in the Republican primary, and making Walt Blackman seem like he is a liberal Republican, which we all know that's ridiculous. Anyway, I checked the number of candidates running in the Republican primary. There's like 6 people running. So it is really not clear who's going to come out of that. I don't know who these people are necessarily. So they're having the Republicans are in turmoil on that side. So hopefully that will benefit Tom in the general. And their infighting will cause the weakening of whoever their candidate is.
Let's hope so. On that ballot, well, there are many whack jobs, but Ron Watkins, who is with QAnon, if he's not Q himself, he's certainly with QAnon. If you've ever heard him speak and stayed up long enough before falling asleep, he has no charisma at all, and he is a dangerous guy and makes Walt Blackman look progressive, which we all know he's not. But yeah, that's going to be an interesting race to follow, as will LD7, where Kelly Townsend is now going after Wendy Rogers, the Trump endorsed candidate. So it's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. Then the last thing that I did want to mention is this Sunday, an entity called the Westboro Baptist Church, which actually has nothing to do with the Baptist Church. It is a hate group. They're anti-Semitic, they're anti-LGBTQ, they are anti just about everything you could think of. They are coming to Sedona because they think our churches are too progressive. And so they are going to be protesting at 4 different churches this Sunday morning in Sedona. We are going to have counter protests that will be peaceful and non-confrontational as a response to them. We will have signs standing up for love. We will turn our backs on hate, those kinds of things. We will gather at corners opposite the churches that they are going to protest at. And that will be gathering at 8:15 at St. Andrews. And then we will follow them from church to church, 4 different churches, to give a presence there. The police know these people are coming to town, and we don't want any problems. We just want to be present there to show them our opposition and that hate has no place here. So if you need any more details, DORR has sent out an email about this, and contact me directly. Contact the DORR office if you want details about what churches and when, and even if you can just go to one of them, that would still be great. Okay, now I am thrilled to introduce State Senator Martín Quezada. He's a lifelong community activist. He is now vice president of his local school board, in addition to having been elected multiple times to the Arizona House and Senate, and has served as the whip for multiple years. You've read his biography, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing for you. But Senator Quezada is now running for Arizona State Treasurer. And I would like the senator, we would love to hear from you about your background, about why you've decided to leave the Senate and go for state treasurer, and tell us a little bit, not just a little bit, but about the state treasurer's office, what it does and how it interacts with the state budget, and a little bit about the budgeting process that happened in the legislature this year, because it's always fascinating and always a little bit flighty. And so we would love to hear from you, Senator. So welcome to Sedona and the Verde Valley.
All right, well, thank you guys for having me. It's good to be back with all of you in Sedona. I know I've been up to Sedona a couple of times over the last couple of months.
You came to our picnic last fall.
Yes.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, I was up at the picnic. I was up at another event, and I was up with Miss McClellan just a few days ago, up in her home there. So it's been great to interact with all of you. You've got a great group up there. And so I'm really proud of all the work that you guys do. I guess really quickly, I'll try to kind of address all the things that Ellen wanted me to talk about. But my background, I've served in the legislature for 10 years. I've served on the school board for 12 years. And I've been practicing law, both in the state and federal courts here in Arizona for the last 13 years. So that's kind of roughly my professional background. I was educated all here in Arizona from our public school system in K-12, our community college system, our state university system, and then I went to our state university system as well for law school. So I'm very much an Arizona born and raised and Arizona educated person, and someone who owes a lot to our public education system. I decided to leave the Senate and run for state treasurer for two reasons. One, I couldn't come back to the Senate. I'm actually terming out after this year. So I've been there for 8 years already. I've served for 4 terms, and this is my last year that I can be a senator. So the choice was either leave the legislature entirely, maybe kind of jump chambers and like a lot of people do and run for the House, or look at another office. And to be honest, I'm not a fan of people that kind of switch chambers back and forth. I did that once from the House to the Senate, and I think that's enough. And so I don't like kind of going back and forth. So I also like kind of giving new people, we need new energy, we need new voices, we need youth to come in and replace people like me. And so I wanted to step aside and give somebody else that chance as well. But I was really leaning towards just kind of walking away from politics. But I got a phone call from a couple of the county treasurers, and I had worked with them on several issues over the last several years. And they sat down with me, they said, hey, we really want you to run for state treasurer. I had never thought about that before. I had never really considered that office. And like I'm sure you all are aware, it's not an office a lot of people think about. It's not a real cool office, right? And so at first I said no, but then they said, think about it, study it, look at it, and we're gonna keep trying to convince you. And so I took the summer all last year to really study that office and learn what it does, learn what it doesn't do. And I talked to several county treasurers, both Democrat and Republican ones, and they all urged me to run. And they said they weren't happy with the current state treasurer. And I talked to other state treasurers from across the nation as well. A couple of Democratic state treasurers from Connecticut, from Oregon, from Illinois, from New Mexico, or from California, I'm sorry. And they all urged me to run. And they said that I had a good background. And so after all of that information, I decided, yeah, this is something I'm going to try to do. And it would be a challenge. It's certainly going to be a challenge. I'm certainly going to be an underdog. But I think that I like stepping up to big challenges like this. And I think that I've always been able to overcome really big challenges. I've always been able to perform above expectations for myself. And so I think I can do it again. And so I have a lot of hope with what we can do in this office. And so I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. I'm sure some of you have heard my pitch before. But, so I really quickly, I've mentioned the 3 roles of the treasurer. If you haven't heard me before speak, there's 3 main roles. You're the chief banker of the state of Arizona, the chief investment officer, meaning you invest billions of dollars for the state. And third, you're the chief financial officer. I want to kind of skip those first 2 and just focus on the chief financial officer part for a minute here, because if we're going to talk about our budget, I think that this is where the state treasurer's role really kind of fits in. So what I see the chief financial officer's role as being is being the voice and an advocate on all financial matters in the state of Arizona, whether it's budget proposals, whether it's the use of federal grant money, whether it's the use of the state in selling public lands to foreign governments for pennies on the dollar so they can raise alfalfa to feed cattle in another country. That's bad kind of money management. And so I see the treasurer being the one to stand up and to speak for good financial moves and good money management and good use of taxpayer money in the state of Arizona. I think that the treasurer should shine a light on what the state is doing with your taxpayer money. And I believe that the treasurer should give you information so that you can determine if all of the other branches of government are using that money as they promised they would, if they're doing it responsibly, and if they're doing it ethically. So that is what I think is a big important role of the Treasurer's Office. And I don't think that's happening at all right now. I don't know if any of you can say that you've heard the Treasurer speak out on any of those issues in the last 4, 8, 12 years.
Who is the
and so
treasurer now?
Our Treasurer now is Kimberly Yee.
Oh,
And so like, I would ask anybody, has anyone heard the Treasurer Yee speak out on any of these issues? I haven't. So yeah, so I think that that's something that the Treasurer should do. So a big part of that is really, I believe the Treasurer could play a really influential role in our state budget and the way our state budget is created and what elements of the budget are proposed and debated and ultimately adopted. And I think that the Treasurer could shine a light on some of the shady moves and the political moves that the legislature is trying to do with the budget. And there's a lot of sneaky things that they do that people don't know about because nobody's telling them. And if there is a person whose responsibility is to talk to you about money, I believe that's a person that should be telling you about these things. So I'm going to tell you about a couple of those things in the state budget that just passed right now. And this was a bipartisan budget. Both Democrats and Republicans voted for it, and both Democrats and Republicans voted against it. And so that's part of the nature of this year's budget is, you know, the Republicans could not get it done on their own. They needed some Democrat help, but it also means Democrats couldn't get everything that we wanted. So there was some negotiating that had to take place, but it's also, I think, a lesson and it really should show, were we effective in that negotiating? Like, were Democrats good at negotiating the best deal that we could have or should have gotten under those political circumstances? I don't believe that we were. I think we could have gotten a much better deal. But I want to tell you some of the shell games that were played in this year's budget. So I think one of the big focuses, and I'm sure Beth will talk about this later, but one of the big focus from politicians this year is the hundreds of millions of dollars that they put into K-12 education, right? And there's a lot of money that was invested in K-12 schools, money for increased base level funding, money for special education. We actually created an opportunity weight this year, money for district additional assistance and charter additional assistance for the next 3 fiscal years. Money for counselors, social workers, and SROs that are in there. So a lot of money went in there. And I can tell you right now, all politicians, Democrats and Republicans, are going to campaign this year on that. They're going to say, we put hundreds of millions of dollars into K-12 schools this year. So we care about schools. We invested in schools. But here's where the shell game comes in. What they didn't do is they didn't address the aggregate expenditure limit. And so I know not a lot of, if you're not in education, you probably haven't heard much about that. It's a 1980 constitutional amendment that creates basically a limit on the amount of spending that school districts can spend. It's basically a cap on the amount of money that we can spend. Doesn't matter how much money the legislature gives us, we can only spend up to that cap. We will come up to, and the legislature can give us the permission to spend above that cap, but they have to pass like a resolution with a 2/3 vote. The legislature didn't do that, and we are going to meet that aggregate expenditure limit in this next fiscal year. With all of that money that came in, we will meet that aggregate expenditure limit, which means that there's more money than we're allowed to spend. So basically what the legislature did is they wrote us a check, but they didn't sign it. So they gave us all this money, but they didn't give us permission to actually spend it. So literally that money's not going to do us any good unless we can get the legislature to pass that aggregate expenditure limit override. And they're going to have to do that either in a special session. And I'll give Superintendent Hoffman a lot of credit. She just called for the governor and the legislature to go into a special session and deal with that aggregate expenditure limit because she knows that we can't spend that money. And I know Democrats are advocating for that as well. But there's been no sign that they want to go into that special session. There's actually been comments made recently by legislators that saying that they are not going to pass that AEL next year. They're going to hold it hostage. And so I expect this to be a big political battle next year. After the election's over, so after they've already campaigned on giving all this money, then we're going to have to fight with the legislature to actually get them to allow us to spend that money. And so I think that's a big shell game. That's kind of like a fake promise that they gave to us. We need more action to be taken if we're going to be able to spend that money. And so that's one example. Another example that I want to give you that's really important, and it's not getting a lot of attention. In this budget this year, we diverted over $1.6 billion from of general fund transaction privileged. This is basically sales tax revenues that we received. We moved $1.6 billion from the general fund to various non-general fund agencies. So we've got a general fund, that's where all of the K-12 money comes out of. And then we got all these other little funds that don't fund public education. We took money out of the general fund and moved it into all these other different funds, $1.6 billion worth. We gave it to the State Highway Fund, to the State Aviation Fund, the Border Security Fund, the Rainy Day Fund, the Parks Board and State Parks Revenue Fund. So why did we do that? Why did we move so much money? It's basically just moving it from one pot to another pot. Why did we do that? Because Arizona signed an agreement with the federal government when we received those ESSER funds, so that federal COVID relief money. When we received that money, we promised the federal government that we would not reduce the general fund revenues so that we would meet the same, it's called a maintenance of effort. So basically we're going to spend the same percentage of general fund money is going to continue to go to public education. We basically promised the federal government that we weren't going to cut public education funding, or that we were going to maintain the percentage of level. Since we had a lot more money this year, that means a lot more money would have to go to K-12 education if we were going to meet that promise that we made to the federal government in order to receive that COVID relief money. So when we move that money out of the general fund, that's less money that gets calculated into that percentage. So basically, we just didn't count $1.6 billion worth of money that we could have and probably should have. Actually, we definitely should have given to public schools. So it was a way to not get, it was specifically a way to not give money to public schools. And the last thing that I'll highlight real quickly is we also eliminated what's called the state equalization property tax rate. So it's basically a property tax that we eliminated. And we shifted that funding from that property tax to the state general fund. So basically another shell game, we moved money from that we get from property taxes and we replaced, and that money goes to our schools. We replaced that money with general fund money. So it's like, okay, we didn't really do anything. We just reduced property taxes, which is a tax cut for some people, but it's mostly for big corporations. So we did a tax cut, and now we're going to replace that money with general fund money, right? Well, what that really means is that in the future, that makes it easier for the legislature to cut that money and to not give that money to public schools. So basically, property taxes, that's a very stable and steady source of money that schools can count on. We can't count on money coming from the legislature. And as you all know, every year, it's a fight to get money from the legislature. So what we did is we took away a solid, reliable source of money, and we shifted that to the general fund. So now it's in the hands of politicians and conservative politicians. So those are the types of shell games that we did this year with the state budget. A whole lot of other ones too, but those are three that I wanted to give you an example of. And those are three that I believe if we had a good state treasurer, the treasurer would have been yelling and screaming about that and telling the public, hey, the legislature, they're playing around with your money, right? This is your taxpayer money, and they're messing with it right now. They're trying to, they're making promises that they're not going to keep. Like they're not promising you what they're actually going to come through with. And this is all a shell game, and the treasurer should shine a light on that. And that's what I believe the treasurer should do. That's what I will do. And I hope that I can have your support with that. So I'll stop right there, but if you guys have any other questions, I can talk about anything else in the budget too. And I want to leave the rest for Beth because she's more of an expert at this than I am. But I'd be happy to answer any questions too.
Mick? This is Mick
You're
Jordan.
muted, Mick.
Mick, you're muted. There.
Sorry, you can't read my lips, I guess. Yeah,
No, we
just
can't.
wanted to say I really appreciate you a lot, Senator. In turn, I've seen you speak a few times now and gotten to know you a bit, and really appreciate your ability to just speak the truth as you see it. I guess I'm increasingly concerned about the politicization of the budget now. And for one bill that just passed is that companies that won't invest in the firearms industry are now banned from investment by state funds. And we're seeing that more and more, whether it's boycotts of foreign countries or now my concern is, you'll get a whole Republican laundry list of, perhaps companies that support Planned Parenthood. You can't invest in them, can't support them. Whatever the Republican issue is, they could tie the hands of the Treasury. I'm wondering if you're elected and you feel like a bill is definitely unconstitutional and you're required to enforce it under state law, what's your perspective on that in terms of your role? I mean, we have a Republican AG that probably wouldn't back you up, but I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's actually a really great question, Mick. And I'm glad you asked that because, I mean, that's been something I've been thinking about a lot if I were to take this role and how I would manage that. And so just to give some background on what Mick's talking about, there's actually been several bills that have been introduced that would limit what the treasurer can invest state money in. And so no matter what issue you care about, the treasurer's office deals with that. So just like you mentioned, Planned Parenthood, there was a bill that would prohibit the treasurer from investing in corporations or organizations like Planned Parenthood that provided, that helped facilitate the ability of people to get an abortion. That bill didn't pass, but that's an example of one that I expect is going to keep coming. Another bill that Mick mentioned that would have prohibited the treasurer from investing in organizations that didn't support gun rights. So if you care about gun rights or gun safety, actually, the treasurer can move that money around towards investments that are more gun safe rather than putting more guns into our community. There was another bill, like I know that Mick is really familiar with, that passed a couple of years ago that prohibited the treasurer from investing in corporations that divested money from Israel that were BDS, the BDS movement. So all of these different kind of limits, on what the treasurer can invest in, those are a lot of efforts. And if I were the treasurer, one, I have to follow the law. So whatever the law that gets passed, I have to follow it. But I also believe that I have an obligation to determine if that law is actually constitutional. And if it's not constitutional, I should not follow it. And so in that sense, I would absolutely speak with the Attorney General. I'm hoping we have a good one next year. I'm hoping we have a good one. I would work with the Attorney General and make a determination. Is this a law that I should be following, or does it violate our Constitution? And if it's not, or if I don't have an Attorney General, I would hire my own legal counsel because I want to have that legal background to justify whatever moves I make as a treasurer. And so as an attorney, I understand that you need that kind of legal background. So I would be more than willing to use my own personal budget to hire outside counsel to give me that backing that I need in order to make the moves that I need to do to stay within the guidelines of the Constitution and possibly challenge a state law that is implemented that I don't believe abides by the Constitution. So in those senses, Mick, I would absolutely challenge those in every way and sense that I could. I'm hoping that it would be an easy sense because I would have an Attorney General with me that would kind of back me up on that.
Thanks so much.
Good question. Holly, you have your hand up.
I do, thank you. Senator, I was following the state budget and I didn't really understand why Democrats voted for it, frankly. And now that you've talked about all these shell games, I really don't understand why Democrats voted for it and why we're so proud that it's a bipartisan budget. So can you give us some insight into did you vote for it and why did you? And why did the caucus promote it?
Yeah, no, a great question. So the budget is actually a package of, 9, 10, 11 different bills. Mm-hmm. I voted only for one of them. And that was the one that dealt with the environment. And I believe that actual budget burb was a decent one. It wasn't great, but it was decent. The other ones, all the rest of them I voted against, including the education one, which did invest hundreds of millions of dollars into education. When I got up and explained my vote, I explained that the reason why I was voting no was because of that aggregate expenditure limit issue, and that you basically written us a check, but you didn't sign it. And so until we got assurance that we could spend that money, it's basically a fake bill. And so I can't support something that's fake until we get an assurance that we're going to get that aggregate expenditure limit dealt with. Now, as far as Democrats voting for it, I can tell you that Democrats were involved in those negotiations. And initially, there was a lot less money that was going to go to K-12 education. Democrats were part of that negotiation, and they got the Republicans to give a little bit more than they were comfortable with. So I will credit us with that. And I think a lot of Democrats supported it because of that. I think a lot of Democrats supported it because they know that the public isn't aware that they wouldn't be able to spend that money. You know, that they believe that it's an easy campaign issue to say I voted for over $700 million in K-12 schools. And it's going to be hard to explain that that's not technically true, you know? And so it's kind of an easy vote, you know? I think other members voted for it. Other members voted for it because they believed that the governor was going to call a special session. And the governor told us, he's like, yeah, I'll probably do that. But he never gave us like an assurance. Like they just said, don't worry, it'll get done. And that I need more than that. Like that, just taking it by the word, I've done that before and it doesn't work. So I needed more than that. So that's why I voted no. But I think a lot of Democrats wanted to take them at their word and were hoping that they would follow through. But as things have evolved since then, it doesn't look like they're going to follow through. So I stand by no vote. I stand by it, and I will continue to stand by it. I think it was the right vote.
I think it was the right vote too. So thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you for doing that. Beth, by the way, if you have anything to add to the discussion, please just jump in and I'll introduce you in a little bit, but feel free to be part of the discussion. I see Karen has her hand up and I think Toby did also. So Karen.
Yeah, I just want, hi, hello, Martín. If you could also explain what we talked about at the meeting we had at my house about the power of the state treasurer to choose how the state invests its money. Because I know a lot of the people listening here are very interested in green energy and climate change and issues like that. So if you could talk about that power that the treasurer does have.
Yeah, and I think that's really the bigger role of the treasurer. That's the one that our state treasurers have embraced in the past is fulfilling that chief investment officer role. So basically, you've got billions upon billions of dollars that the treasurer is protecting, overseeing, and investing. So the treasurer actually creates an investment portfolio for the state of Arizona, and we invest money in various different organizations, obviously government bonds and stocks, and it's a whole portfolio that we create. So with that latitude, the treasurer can invest money in things that don't really match our values. We've got a lot of money right now invested in fossil fuels. We've got money invested in gun manufacturers. We've got money invested in corporations that absolutely oppose pay equity and absolutely oppose diversity, absolutely oppose paying their workers a living wage, absolutely oppose allowing their workers to unionize. So imagine if we had a treasurer that created a portfolio that also reflected our values. Imagine if we had a treasurer that was investing in corporations that could prove that they were going to use their water efficiently, that they weren't going to be wasting water in our state. Imagine if you had an investment officer that was only going to invest the state's money in corporations that could prove that they were going to support greener energy, cleaner energy, rather than fossil fuels. Imagine, and we would be, in a sense, allowing the money that we've already paid to work for us even more and to support our planet, to protect our water, and to support businesses that are actually doing better for our community and for our society. And so like right now, two of our biggest investments are Facebook and Amazon. We've got over $1 billion invested in those two corporations. So I believe that we could be investing in a smarter way, in a more values-based way. And the best thing about that is that when you invest in that way, you actually make more money. More money comes into the state when you invest with a conscience. And so that's what we're not doing now. And that's what I believe we should be doing in the future.
That's very interesting. I don't think a lot of people knew that all this was going on. That's really very interesting. And I agree completely, and I'm sure most of us do. Toby, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. I was wondering if vouchers were going to be paid for out of that money. I think CEBV, unless I misunderstood them, talked about that money being paid for out of the money allocated to the school in the budget.
No, that's a great question, and that's totally a Beth issue. So I'm gonna allow her to be the lead on that. But what I will say is, yes, and that's another issue that the treasurer should have been speaking out about. The treasurer should be telling the public what is our empowerment scholarship account, our basically vouchers. What are the vouchers costing us as a state? And is it smart for the state of Arizona to be funding two separate public school systems? Is that smart? Is that fiscally conservative? Is that a good use of taxpayer money? I don't think so. And so if I were the treasurer, I would be speaking out about that really loudly. And I'd be standing right next to Beth when she's, dropping her knowledge on all of us about that too.
Okay, I just had another question too. Is tax credit money being diverted when I choose a school to give my money to? Is that money, you had said that money was being diverted. Is the tax credit money still going to be in the same?
So yeah, the money the shell game that I mentioned earlier, when the tax money that was moved, it's technically not being diverted. It's still gonna pay for what it's supposed to pay for, but it's basically an accounting trick. It's an accounting trick. So the money's still there, only it just doesn't count in our budget, so that we don't have to pay more for public education. So we wanted to lower the amount of money in that budget so that we could maintain that percentage that we had to pay. And so it's basically just an accounting maneuver. It's a slick, sneaky accounting move. It just moved money from one column to another, but it's still going to pay for those things that it's supposed to pay for. We just did it in a different way. Instead of paying it from the general fund, we just moved it to another fund and paid for it from there.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions for the senator? Okay, thank you for being here. You're certainly welcome to stay, and
Oh, I will.
because Beth has a lot of good information for us. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your consistent support of our little area, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to put my links in the chat. I really need your help. If you guys can contribute, it would really help me out a lot. And it would help not only my race, but it's going to help the other statewide races as well. Because I'm going to be targeting different audiences, different groups of voters. That's going to help our Senate. It's going to help our governor, Secretary of State. So please consider doing that. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here. I think when we talk about or think about making our contributions, we sometimes don't think about statewide candidates for offices like this. We think about who's representing our legislative district and our congressional district, or, the sexier things like Attorney General or Secretary of State, Governor. But State Treasurer has a lot of power. So thank you for opening our eyes to that. Beth Lewis is here with us. She is the director of Save Our Schools, and she is a superhero and a super mom and a super everything, super teacher. She's got a wonderful background in education, and we think we volunteer and do a lot of stuff. She has jumped in and is changing the face of education in Arizona and trying to put her finger in the dike as trying to save the public schools and get money to fund them equitably, and so that our money is not siphoned off into vouchers and it's been a really uphill battle. So Beth, tell us about Save Our Schools. Tell us about what you've been doing, about yourself, and definitely about the new petition drive, because we are going to be helpful for that. We do have petitions in our office already. That, don't worry, that happens to everybody here. All right, so welcome, Beth Lewis. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Ellen. Thanks so much for having me. It's so great to see you all and to listen to Senator Quezada. I'm telling you, if we had an entire legislature filled with Quezadas, we would have fully funded schools, we would have people with backbones, and we would have great lives for everybody in Arizona. So very excited to support his run for treasurer, but really, really sad that we're gonna not have him in the legislature next year, because we need, if I could clone you, Senator, I would. So yes, I am a teacher. I've been a teacher for 12 years in Arizona. I'm a parent of 2 kids. They're going into 4th and 5th grade. I don't know where the time goes. And I'm one of the co-founders of Save Our Schools. Save Our Schools Arizona started around 5 years ago to refer the original universal ESA voucher bill. Can I see a show of hands? Did anybody, I know Karen, did anybody collect signatures 5 years ago on that voucher referendum? Yeah, so we're feeling, some of us like this is Groundhog Day. But here we are. As Senator Quezada, laid forth our state budget, we did get hundreds of millions of dollars added to K-12 education. From our perspective at Save Our Schools, and I think this was alluded to, that money is going into the top of the bucket. Universal vouchers being passed is just gouging holes in the bottom of the bucket. So, when it comes to the current legislature that we have, we know that those lawmakers will never give more than they're going to get, right? And I can't put it any other way. So negotiating with people like that is never truly negotiation. It is called a bipartisan budget for the reasons that Senator Quezada laid out. It's not exactly bipartisan if the minority party is only brought in at the end and doesn't have that actual true input early on to really craft a budget that would really help Arizonans. Despite these gains, regardless of vouchers, schools are still going to be chronically underfunded in Arizona. We may move up to maybe 45th in the nation. So I think it's, a great first step. Besides the vouchers, which we'll talk about, we know that they were essentially keeping up with inflation, essentially keeping up with their promise to the federal government. So, none of this was this huge, magnanimous gesture to public schools that the Republicans are trying to make it seem like. They were just doing the bare minimum, and they are really good at making themselves look good. So we need to make sure to tell the truth to all of our neighbors who are asking. So let's get to vouchers. So at the 11th hour, they forced through an amendment on the universal voucher bill that stripped any accountability, any academic accountability from the bill, and then they shoved it through. Now we had 3 lawmakers who had said for different reasons, Republicans, that they would vote against that bill, partially because it defied the will of Arizona voters, partially because it had no accountability, and partially because it robbed our public schools. And yet these 3 Republican lawmakers did not have a backbone. At the end of the day, they took the money for K-12, they looked the other way and voted yes for vouchers. And now we're in a situation where we have a new voucher bill. This one's worse than 2017. The reason it's worse is because there's no cap, right? So this is complete unfettered throwing our taxpayer dollars into private academies or homeschooling. And so one of the things I think people don't really understand is that right now we have 85,000 students who are currently enrolled in private schools or in homeschools. Those students will be eligible, if we don't get the referendum done, which we will, those students will be eligible to take $7,000 each on September 24th. That is $600 million overnight that leaves our general fund, right? All of the investments we just made are essentially stripped away overnight. That's not even, and those are for kids that aren't even changing their schooling situation, right? They try to say that, oh, these kids need to leave their school, they need to go find a better school. No, none of these kids are even changing their schooling situation. So we have launched a referendum. I hope you've all heard about it. We launched as soon as the governor was gearing up to sign. He waited 10 days. He was allowed to do that, but he subtracted 10 days from our field efforts because he's just that nice of a fellow. And so we have until September 24th to collect 118,000 valid signatures. A lot of people are asking me why that number is so low compared to initiatives. This is not an initiative, it's a referendum. So we're seeking to refer the bad law that the legislature passed and put it on the 2024 ballot. This is important for several reasons. We are not guaranteed a new legislature next session. We're not guaranteed an ability to fix and turn this back. We are working so hard towards that end, but there are no guarantees. You cannot put this genie back in the bottle. If you allow $1 billion to leave our public school system, our general fund, and go to private schools, we're going to have one heck of a time ever getting that money back. So we have to stop it in its tracks now. We also, I want to underscore that there are extremist academies opening up all over the state. Charlie Kirk is opening up Turning Point Academy at Dream City Church in Glendale, in Senator Quezada's backyard. We've got Tipping Point Academy, which we're trying today. It seems like it might have connections to Steve Bannon or, one of the QAnon type groups. So Charlie Kirk has said that he wants to open up schools all across the state. And it's not a coincidence that he's starting in Arizona. The reason he's starting in Arizona is because we are the only state that passed universal vouchers. So starting on September 24th, if we don't get this job done, Charlie Kirk can have $4 million for one school, 600 kids on vouchers. $4 million of our taxpayer funding going to Turning Point USA, which teaches, really hateful ideology, homophobic ideology, racist ideology. It's incredibly dangerous. And so we have the opportunity to stop this. I know that the Democrats of the Red Rocks are going to have the office open this Saturday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Is that right, Karen? Yep. Karen's got petitions. I know she has been rocking it. Love you so much, Karen. And we have, spots all around. If you're closer to Flagstaff or you'll be in another area this weekend, I really encourage you to sign and then maybe to think about taking a petition or two so that you can just gather from your local friends and family if you don't want to do like a big tabling event. Truly every signature counts, even if you just get 3 or 4, that truly matters. And we'll be having a lot of notary events and things going forward to make sure that we get all of those back. I am going to put a quick link into the chat because if folks would prefer to do something like notarize or be a driver, do data entry, those sorts of things from home, there are a lot of opportunities. And so this form just allows you to sort of check off things that you would be interested in doing, even having like a little signing party at your house that we could help you advertise. So there are a lot of ways to jump in and be helpful, but I can't underscore enough that this is truly the dismantling of public education right here in front of our eyes. It is happening in Arizona. We are not going to have public schools as we know them in 5-10 years if we do not continue to stop this in its tracks. So with that, I would love to take any questions from any of you all. And I'm just really, really appreciative to have the time with you. Karen.
Just wanted to reiterate that we have the petitions at the DORR office. I put my phone number in the chat. If you can't come to the office and you want, I'll deliver you petitions. We'll figure out somewhere else that I can meet you to give them to you. Anybody in the Verde Valley, the same thing for pickup. I'm here in the DORR office every Thursday and I'm a notary. so I can notarize the petitions, and I'll pick up completed ones, the same thing. My phone number there is in the chat, so keep a note of that, and I'll meet you somewhere else. I see Kat Ginzel put something in the chat. This Saturday evening at her house, she's holding an event in Rimrock. You can sign petitions, pick them up there. So just let me know, and I'll make sure you get them somehow if you can't make it to the door office when we're open. Thank you.
And we can also have them at the, for example, the election watch party that will be at the DORR office. We can have them there. Anybody that wants to help circulate. I don't think most people realize that we're the only state in the country that has a universal, will have a universal voucher program. Were you there in that? Were you in there in the chamber that last night, right before they adjourned?
I was. It was wild.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point, the House had already voted on this, so we didn't really hold out much hope in the Senate. Our main Republican holdouts were in the House. So it was just an incredibly depressing experience. Michelle Ugenti-Rita was throwing a tantrum and missing for several hours. And I guess our only last hope was that she would refuse to come back. And that was truly all we could hang it on, which is silly, but you just never know when the ball's going to come your way, especially with temperamental lawmakers. Because let me tell you, I know Senator Quezada is too kind to say it, but man, we are not sending our best and brightest down there. And there are people who truly act like children. Like I taught middle school for 6 years. The level of immaturity of some of our lawmakers, particularly on the Republican side, it is astonishing. So we were hopeful that maybe Ugenti-Rita might not come back. She's running for Secretary of State. Please don't vote for her. But she did. She voted for the bill. It passed through. We actually, it was wild because the police started firing tear gas at protesters. So they ended up evacuating the Senate floor, and we ended up being shoved in with them. So going down a staircase with Kelly Townsend and JD Mesnard, and it was just a very weird night. But I think we all kind of took stock, licked our wounds, said, what are we going to do? Are we going to do this thing again? And my phone just rang off the hook all weekend long. Just incredible support from all around the state saying, yeah, we have to do this. There's no other way forward, and it's not ideal. It's not how I want to spend the next, 3 months of my life, but because I really like my children, but here we are. And, once you pick a battle with Betsy DeVos and powerful national special interests, you have to continue the fight. You can't just leave it for somebody else to pick up the pieces. And to your point, Ellen, I think, we're watching the destruction here in Arizona, but governors all across the country are saying, we need to replicate this in our state. Every red state should do this next session. And so I kind of think, as goes Arizona, so goes the rest of the country. And so we really have a responsibility to hold this back here and to show lawmakers around the country that voters do not like this. Vouchers have been put on ballots across the country 22 times, and they have failed every single time, all across the country. And legislatures across the country in red states voted this stuff down. In Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, states all across the country this session, Arizona was the only one that didn't get the job done.
So what happened? The voters spoke clearly 4 years ago, and it was just ignored. How can that be? And what's to prevent that from happening again with this referendum?
Well, I think they like to say that there was an asterisk, that voters voted against it because, there wasn't a cap, and maybe we didn't, have as much money spent against it. And so I think this will be kind of the ultimate battle, the battle royale, to really sort of definitively remove that asterisk and say, regardless of all of these pieces that you keep putting forth, you gave it your best try and we defeated you again. So get out of our state and stop.
Marilyn, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Beth, for your very, very helpful comments. I'm not sure I understand concerning the cap on the ability to spend the 1.6 billion. Is that, I realize that that's a complex question. It may vary from school district to school district, but in general, is that cap going to be preventing any expenditure of any of those funds, or is it 50% or is it 10%? How much will the cap stop the schools from spending in general?
Senator Quezada, do you want to take that question?
Sure. Yeah, it is a complicated question, and it'll impact every school district differently. And so actually earlier this year, we were going through the same battle because we had met that limit already, and we needed the legislature to override the aggregate expenditure limit this year. And each district did a study, and it was produced of how each district would be impacted. But it would be a major impact. And I can tell you that it would be I'm a school board member as well. So I can tell you from a school board member perspective, just the impacts would just be incredibly dramatic. I mean, we would have to revise our budget mid-year. We would have to make mid-year cuts to all sorts of programs. We probably might have to lay teachers off. Some schools were talking about having to close down campuses. So the impacts would be tremendous if we didn't get that override waived.
So this, as I understand it, the vouchers would cover transportation. So if parents wanted to send their kids to school in Uber, they could do that. I mean, to Charlie Kirk's bigotry school, they could do that, private rides and things like that.
Yeah, and they have a new company called Hop Skip Drive that is set up in other states to sort of do this. And some of those folks were special interests who came in and pushed this idea even last session of allowing, any state money to go to this funding. But they do background checks, but I'm not going to put my kids in an Uber with some strange person, regardless of whether this company has done a background check. And we researched them when we were fighting that bill last session. And there's a lawsuit in Las Vegas of a 13-year-old girl who was assaulted by her driver in the Hop Skip Drive model. And so, it kind of speaks to the lack of safety standards in general, right? There's nothing in this bill that would stop a bad actor from opening up a school in a strip mall, saying, here's a Chromebook, telling the parents, yeah, we're doing all of this great stuff. Here's a plaid skirt. We're a private school. We got you here with, whatever transportation coupon, and taking the money and running, doing horrible things. There's no safety inspections required. There's no safety standards. There's no fingerprinting required. There's no teacher credentials, principal credentials. Anytime you open up a program like that, there are good people who will open up schools with good intent, and there are a lot of bad actors that will come in and rob our state blind.
And basically no oversight.
Yeah, I think the homeschoolers have more oversight, right? Because in the homeschool, they have this thing called Class Wallet where they have to submit their receipts. But at the same time, the oversight is, yeah, you bought curriculum, but the curriculum, some of it's from Bob Jones University. I'm not kidding. Abika, it's creationism. They say they're teaching science, but I don't know how you teach that the world was created 6,000 years ago and say that you're teaching high school science.
We elect people that say that the world was created 6,000 years ago.
Right, and they would love to open up a school in a strip mall, these folks, and make money. But I don't want my taxpayer dollars going to Bob Jones University curriculum.
So to summarize, if this petition does not get the 118,000, which it will, but if it does not, then this the voucher law goes into effect September 24th of this year.
Mm-hmm.
If the petition gets 118 legitimate signatures, which means you need more than that, then that will stop things in its track until the 2024 elections.
Correct. Yep. And then we're going to have to battle, Betsy DeVos and big money to fight this in,
Right.
2024, but
Well,
I'm always a big fan of fighting the fight that's in front of you and living to fight the next day. And that's just kind of what you got to do. And I'm not scared. I know what Arizona voters want.
and they call them empowerment grants. I mean, the Republicans really are so good at spinning things. This is not an empowerment grant, but they put it that way. All right, well, that's depressing, but optimistic that there are people like you and people in Save Our Schools that are fighting so hard to make this happen, including Karen. Thank you so much. We appreciate it all. Any other questions for Beth? Toby?
It's not a question, but and you already said it, but I wanted to reiterate. You get 5 names on the petition and turn it in. It's important. And I happen to have done that with the petition. It was mailed to me. I had to pay the postage. And then I went over to the office and I had my husband's name, my name, and there were 2 people in the office and I had their name and then someone else. So there were these 5 names and they were welcomed. And it can help just to have a few. You don't have to fill up the whole petition. You don't have to fill up several, but you're helping.
Good point. Good point.
Absolutely. And try to sign somebody else's petition. So when you pick up, and not to sign your own, and then make sure that that you don't pull out the back of the petition unless you're in the presence of a notary.
It is confusing for people out in the field like us, that which is one petition after another after another. Fortunately, we have people like Kat that can help us keep it all straight. But this is a fresh new one. So when people say, I've already signed it, they really haven't. I mean, it's very unlikely at this point, because this really only started, 2 weeks ago. And Save Our Schools just rushed right in and started printing these petitions like crazy so they could circulate them as fast as possible. So kudos to all of you, including Karen, who was down there. I saw the pictures. So. All right, anything else, Beth or Senator, before we end this? Any other questions? Well, thank you all. Thank you two for being here. We appreciate it. And thank you all for tuning in to the DORR breakfast, where we appreciate everybody that's here, their quality times together. And we are looking at doing a hybrid type of meeting starting in September, where we will physically be together. And we will also be able to bring people in from remote areas, and hopefully that'll work out. So thank you all again for being here. And we will see you maybe Sunday at the churches, at Tom O'Halloran's, at the watch party. Lots of good stuff coming up. So thanks again. Bye-bye.